Hello everybody, welcome back to another reasonable price prediction, the series where we try to figure out where your favorite altcoins could be headed. Now today we're looking at VeChain, as requested in the comments from the previous videos. Not the first time we've covered VeChain on this channel, but it's definitely been a while. So yeah, well overdue. This video is turning into Yoda. Anyway, the kind of two perspectives that I want to present to you this video with the US dollar chart anyway is the idea of a left translated cycle and the idea of a right translated cycle. And I'll leave it up to you to kind of decide which one you believe in most, but I'm just going to present what has happened in the last few months and what happened in a similar time frame around 4 years ago. So taking a look at what's happened recently, we can see that since kind of September, October time last year, 2023, VeChain has been in a strong rally up, and we can see we've climbed about 250% from the low that's kind of around here to the peak that we put in at the start of this year. But since that peak, we've been in a downward trend, and we've even now broken down below the bull market support band and even been rejected. Having made like a move to the upside, we've been rejected. So straight away off the bat, this looks very bearish, to me at least. Now, VeChain could move to the upside, it's very possible. However, a rejection already off the bull market support band does signal more bad price action to come. I think there's probably going to be a gap here before we maybe come back to the bull market support band. And if it's going to break to the upside, that's when it might decide to do it. But there needs to be a bit of a space, a bit of breathing space now for VeChain to come back and try break above again. We also see that we had these two kind of stops, if you will, or kind of pauses in VeChain's strong momentum upwards. The first one is almost non-existent, and you could argue isn't really a pause or a stop. It's just kind of a random red week thrown in there. But the second one is definitely more prominent, as we do get quite a strong pullback down and a few weeks of trading sideways, followed by, you know, a kind of very strong move to the upside where we break past the previous resistance that we set. So zooming out and taking a look at what we've seen in the past, to me there were two periods of time that stood out, and one of them would complement the left translated cycle theory and the other would complement the right translated cycle theory. So starting with the left, as it is closer, we can see if we zoom out, so we have both of them on the screen, first of all we get these two blue kind of circle ticks, these two little pit stops in the rally up like we did here. However, we could argue that this second pit stop that we've had recently is very different to either of the pit stops we had in the left translated cycle. By the way, this was early April of 2020 when we got this move, so leading up to the bull run, kind of just around the halving time, but ticks the box basically of two pauses before our peak. And then with our peak, we can also see we kind of test it a couple of times before being rejected. That definitely happened recently. That definitely happened with the left translated cycle comparison. We hit it once, we hit it twice. Here we hit it once, we hit it twice. You could argue we hit it 4 times. I would probably say 3 times to be fair, before having our retracement and moving back down. Also, with the previous cycle, we can see that when we draw a kind of trend line to mark these lows, when we broke below the trend line, we can see that the bull market support band flipped as well. And if we kind of take a look at what happens when we draw a trend line in the current day, the kind of rally up that we had in the last few months, we can see that when we broke below the trend line, the bull market support band also flipped during that time. So again, kind of if that's enough evidence for you and you're ready to write home that, yep, this is where we are, you can expect kind of a few months, more or less, of nothing happening, a bit lower, but ultimately not going too much lower than the previous highs that we put in at this second blue. Now we've already gone below them, so you could say that we're not going to go much lower at all. Last cycle again, we kind of came to the weekly closes, and we're currently at more or less the weekly closes. So you could say this is the lows, a couple more months and you're in a bull run. Everything's good. However, there are a few things that are obviously different. I mean, first of all, the percentage move from the lows to the high are drastically different. I mean, last cycle we moved up a far greater magnitude than we currently have this cycle. As you can obviously see, we're about 250% of a move up. Here we're well over 1,200% of a move up. You could also argue that the things that came before this move, last cycle, haven't played out yet this cycle. You could make a case for it. You could say that this first move to the upside is maybe this guy, and this second move to the upside was this guy. However, I think that's a very weak argument. So if we kind of are in this part of the cycle, we've skipped the majority of what we got before it. So we've kind of gone bull run, bear run, straight back into bull run, instead of having the usual faff of like bull run, bear run, up, down, bull run. We've kind of just gone 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But of course, this might be this type of a move, and that's kind of getting to the right translated cycle theory that I'm going to go on about. If you don't think that these line up that well, if you think there's just too many dissimilarities between the two, you might be more in favor of the right translated cycle. That is the one I am personally interested in. And now, while it does look different in terms of things like the trend line that we've followed up, we definitely got with the right translated cycle. If we take a look at this sort of move that we had, and this is often called the minor bull run. Usually in a Bitcoin cycle between halvings, you'll have a major bull run and a minor bull run. This could be considered the minor bull run that VeChain would have experienced. We can see that if we zoom in, we kind of get a strong move to the upside for a few months. We get a strong pullback, a bit of a pause, and then we get another strong move to the upside. And if we take a look at kind of what's happened here under a different light, you can see that we got a few months of green, followed by a couple of weeks of red, strong pullback and a pause, followed by another strong move before we put in our top. And here, that's kind of what we got. Also, in terms of resistance, when we put in this top, we tried it a few times. 1, 2, 3, 4 wicks to the top, but none closing below it. Here, if we count 1, 2, 3, 4 wicks, I'll move this down a tiny bit so that, 4 wicks to the top, 5 even. So again, we're ticking that box. But also a thing to note is, if this is the kind of right translated theory that we're looking at, we can expect a strong downward move over the next few months, sort of retrace all the value that we made in the first few green months before this single blue move. We can basically expect to come back down to these lows, and also we can expect to be rejected a second time at this level. So basically you're looking at a long time of bad price movement, more or less, from VeChain. Basically this is the top, and it's likely to go down before it goes up again. Again, if you're kind of copying and pasting this pattern onto today's price chart. Now, if you kind of want to consider this as the more accurate version, you can see that for the first time that we tried to move above this resistance, this first wick that we made, it took 39 weeks for us to get our final rejection. And that's basically when the bull market started. After we had this rejection up here, we had a few more weeks of red, and then we were in our bull run. So basically 39 weeks, but if you want to say the bull run started in 43, we can go from that. Going from this first move up, I need to adjust that. There we go. So going from 39 weeks on from when we first got this high, we can expect to get rejected sometime at the end of this year. And if you want to go 4 weeks along after this, you're looking at basically, again, further on towards the end of this year, mid-December timeframe, when our bull run starts. And that does kind of line up very much so with the right translated cycle theory. The right translated cycle theory basically means that we're at the end of our minor bull run. We're going to come down from this now, and then over the rest of the year for the next 6 months, that's going to be our minor bear run. And then we'll be in our bull run, our big major bull run. Another similarity is that, of course, the percentage move from the high to the low is more or less the same. We've got a 20% wiggle room there for error, which I think is more than acceptable, especially in crypto when you have crazy moves up within a 20% range is pretty accurate to me. So tick in terms of price range that we move within, tick in terms of time frame spent going up, tick in terms of the long pause that we get. Of course, we don't kind of have the same move with the bull market support band where we draw this trend line up, but to be honest with you, this trend line might as well not be there. It's basically an imaginary line. And you could even fix this to a degree where maybe you have it like this, and I could say, oh, well, we cross the trend line here, we break the trend line here, and this is where the bull market flips. And you could argue, to be honest with you, that that is kind of true. We break it here on the normal chart. If I bring this back to how it was, we break that here on this red week, and then a week later, the bull market support band flips. Either way, it's not too telling. It's not an indicator I would base a trade off solely. And in fact, it wouldn't really be an indication I would pay too much attention to. But we also do have the bull market support band flipping at a similar time, bull market support band flipping. And that's after a few weeks of being rejected from the top, a few weeks of being rejected at the top, cross back down. So in my opinion, I'm right translated cycle. You can, of course, be whatever you want to be. You can, hey, it's 2024, man, choose whatever gender you want. But, jokes aside, with the chart, it doesn't matter to me what way you choose to believe in. I'm just here to basically present information to you. And then, of course, in terms of like price movement that you can expect, assuming that we come down to these lows again, which of course is an if, and this is for the right translated cycle, you can kind of, VeChain made crazy moves last bull run. I would not be that bullish. If VeChain is going to make a move like that, it would be in the top 20 market caps at least. I don't know if it's still got that steam. Maybe you could, with these altcoins, 10x's aren't unlikely, especially from the lows when they come back to them. If VeChain does come back down to this low, maybe something like a 20x is on the table, could be good money to make there. But I could definitely see it returning to its all-time highs, which would be 25 cents. And for reference, we're currently trading at 3 cents. The peak that we put in, that if you believe in the right translated cycle, we're not going to break above for a while, was at 5 cents. And the low that we moved up from was 1.5 cents. So again, if we do come back to these lows and move to the upside, that's well over a 10x, and you're kind of looking at 20x kind of returns. Assuming that it breaks past the all-time high, you're looking at even crazier returns. And from just buying now, if you think it's not worth the risk of waiting for it to go down, I think VeChain's going to do well. To return to its all-time high, it would need a 600% move. So either way, you're making good money. And the fact that it has kind of made this bullish move during this time frame does indicate to me as well that there's obviously still a pulse for this altcoin. It's not been completely forgotten about. There are still people trading it. The price is moving up and down with the rest of the crypto space. It's not a forgotten relic. And again, the price movement of like 250% has been kind of what we've seen across the board from altcoins that are expected to not do terribly, is the way I would phrase that sentence. So overall, long-term bullish. Looking at the Bitcoin chart, we can see that a lot is going on. Looks a lot more volatile than the US dollar chart. And to be honest with you, in my opinion, paints a better picture of where we are with VeChain this cycle. Now, first of all, explaining what everything is, these orange lines represent the halving. And as you can see, these time frames before represent how long it took for us to kind of put in the last final bull move before completely giving up and letting the bears win and letting the price completely capitulate, at least against Bitcoin. And we can see the first cycle back in 2019, it was April where this happened, and it took 54 weeks, or it was 54 weeks, before the halving when this happened. And if we take a look at what's happened most recently before our current halving, it's been 60 weeks since we put in this high and came to our halving. So we can assume that those are pretty similar and will probably play some sort of significance because it was the last kind of move the bulls could muster before completely giving up. And we can see it took a while before us to really break above that properly. We kind of had a fake out here for a month or two, only for us to crash back down and completely lose all the value that we gained. And it was only in the bull run where we actually broke above it and stayed above it for more than 2 months. So again, we're going to be kind of holding out and waiting to break above this move for at least a month before we even consider VeChain to be in a crazy bull run like we would hope for in 2021. Another interesting point is that obviously VeChain put in this low last cycle, but it wasn't the only time it would kind of come back down to that low. We saw it visited it once just before the halving. And to me, this does kind of reinforce the right translated cycle because we can see we came to it before the halving last cycle, and now we've actually revisited it after the cycle. So again, the right translated theory suggests that everything that's happening now happened in the previous cycle later on. So we're slow this cycle. So while these things here happened before the halving, they're now happening after the halving in this cycle. And we've seen this with a lot of altcoins, and VeChain doesn't appear to be any different. Good news is though that when we came down here for the second time, it was the last time we visited. Now it will depend. We could go lower here. We don't have to stop at this level, and in fact we have wicked down below. We have now gone to basically a new cycle low, if you will. We've gone lower than basically where we were last cycle, and there's a very strong chance that we could keep going lower. However, if you're trading Bitcoin in, if you've been smart, you've been holding Bitcoin during the bear run, and you've really got your eye on VeChain, you want to put some of that Bitcoin into VeChain, now is probably a pretty good time to do that, to be honest with you. Because once we kind of come down to these lows, we don't usually go lower. And you could argue that, okay, instead of it being a percentage move where we put in this low and we come back down to this low, perhaps you expect us to move just to this price. You expect us to move to this price instead of this percentage. And that is valid. But of course, if you want to assume that too, the price that it would have to drop is 30%. So even if you're buying now and it does drop that much, in the long term, it's not going to be that much of a big deal. And you can see actually from these price movements, it often doesn't take long for VeChain to move back above this level. Even if it does come back down, it doesn't take long for it to move back up again. So again, probably, in my opinion, not financial advice, a good time to pick up VeChain on the Bitcoin pair. We also kind of had this top, again, similar. The only difference is that we kind of had two moves up. So again, nothing is the same. Another thing to point out is that going back to this kind of final bull move that we spoke about earlier, it took us 44 weeks after the halving for us to break above this level significantly. Now, if we go 44 weeks out from where we currently are, that puts us early next year. So again, that does also line up with where we potentially said the bull market could be taking place. We said it would probably be starting around the end of this year. December came up, November came up. At this point, we've had a few weeks of the bull run. Over here, we've had a few weeks of the bull run. February time would probably line up if we're taking a couple of months in to break above this level. Ultimately, over the short term, to me, it wouldn't matter if VeChain continued to go down on its Bitcoin pair too much, because it's just time in the market beats timing in the market. I think if you're swapping it, converting Bitcoin for VeChain now, you're doing a pretty good job. And if you're holding it for a year, you're going to be fine. You're going to be in the green on the Bitcoin and the US dollar, in my opinion. Short term, could be price volatility, could go down. Medium term, chances are you're probably going to be in the green. Long term, I would say yes, you'll definitely be in the green. And for long term, I would say kind of the 2-year time frame. And if we take a look at kind of how long it was when we came back down to this low that we put in our peak, we can see it was 58 weeks. So a year and a sixth, if you get me, a year and 2 months. And it also outperformed Bitcoin to a huge degree as well, which is also nice. And hopefully we could see something similar again happen this cycle. Either way, it's not a bad alt to pick, and it's not a bad alt to get into now, if that's the type of thing you want to do. Again, I could be completely wrong. I'm just telling you what I think. Again, none of the stuff in this video has to happen. It's just a hypothetical. It's what I think will happen. Hopefully it does. Hey, it wouldn't be too bad. Either way, thank you so much for watching. I'm pretty sure I've rambled for too long now. So if you liked the video, please leave a like if it helped you out. If you didn't, leave a dislike too. That's totally fine as well. And comment down below where you think VeChain is headed. Thanks so much, guys, for watching. Take care and peace.